Good evening, everyone. You have Yakarius, also known as Kamal, with you, and we have our distinguished guest for the second time, part two, Jeffrey Deskovic, Esquire, right? Formerly incarcerated, also exonerated. So we're going to delve back into that. Just a recap for anyone that did not watch last episode. I encourage you to go and see part one because my little synopsis is not going to do it justice. But um, Jeffrey Deskovic was arrested at the age of 16 for the murder of a fellow high school student that was 15 years old for rape and murder. He served 16 years and then was exonerated. We're going to dive in. I'm going to let him explain the details. That's the gist of it. And he came home, and I'm saying Esquire because he's a lawyer. He's also an advocate. And he has done a lot of work in the 18 years that he's been home. So, first of all, how you doing this evening, Jeffrey?
I'm great. Happy to be joining you back-to-back weeks. It's great, especially considering our history. I never imagined I'd be Esquire. I never imagined you'd be doing a podcast, much less you'd be
Right,
interviewing. So it's
right. That's a
amazing, right?
fact.
Man plans, God the best of planners. I to quote you, I believe.
That's a fact. So, before I open it up, I just want to give you this piece of information real quick. Do you remember you remember Jersey? I think he worked
I
in the
do,
Metro,
Ralph
right?
Parks. Ralph
And he
Parks.
was in the mess. He was in honor block with us for a brief moment.
Yeah, he
So
was.
that's how I got the message,
I worked with him in food service. So yes, go ahead.
right? But anyway, so he also told me that, and I don't know if you know this, whatever officer that was a mess hall officer that was kind of riding you a little bit.
Yeah, that was Officer Johnson. Yeah.
Oh, really? I'm surprised. Anyway, and I guess I shouldn't be. They said that someone took a copy of the article of your exoneration and put it on his locker. Now, I wasn't there. That's what I was told. I just thought you should know that. Maybe you'll get a little bit of pleasure out of knowing that.
I feel a little I feel a little
Okay.
vindication.
All
I
right.
feel a little vindication. So maybe he could feel a little bit guilty about
Right.
about doing that. I mean, certainly that's not a correction officer's job to ride any
Hmm.
prisoner about whatever crimes they either committed or alleged to have committed. You're just there for care, custody, control, and that's it. And that wasn't a professional thing that he did. It was dangerous. It could have caused other prisoners to attack me. I mean, there were times when people came up to me and said, "Yo, Officer Johnson is in the other mess hall. He's telling people about your case. I guess he's trying to put a battery in their back for them to assault me." So I'm happy to know that Officer Johnson learned that I was, in fact, not only that I was innocent, and hopefully that could have led him to reflect that even if I was guilty, which I was not, you simply don't do that.
Yeah, well, we have Tracy. Hi, Tracy. Mahogany. I'm going to start saying mahogany. I'm
Hello, how are
sorry. How
you?
you doing this evening?
It's fine. I'm
Okay,
doing well in yourself. How you?
fine. I don't know if
Good.
you caught what I was telling him about. There was an officer like riding him a little bit in the mess hall where he worked full service, and I was told that they took a copy of the article of the newspaper and put it on his locker to let him
Oh,
know that he was just like you was dead wrong. The man was innocent,
right,
that type of thing.
right,
So
absolutely.
I don't know if he knew. Did you know that? Did you
I
hear
did
that
not
before?
know that. No, I didn't
Okay,
know that.
all right, okay. So it's third hand. I didn't see it myself. Jersey told me.
Okay.
And so, and I don't know if he ever thought I would see you to tell you, but we was just kicking it and chatting. But in any event, so enough of that. So let's talk about that again. Let's start from your arrest. How did that? You want to talk about that for me? How it made you feel? You were
Yeah.
16 years old, like.
So I was arrested when I was 16 for murder and rape I didn't commit.
Mm,
We covered that last episode, but
mm,
I got on the police radar originally because the police interviewed many students from the high school, and some of them told the police that they might want to speak with me. because I didn't quite fit in. So I lived a double life. I didn't really think of it that way at the time, but there was my life in school and there was my life out of school. Out of school, there was a lot of kids. I was popular. You know, I pretty much what I would suggest would be what we would do. We're going to play kickball. We're doing basketball. It's Monopoly night, video games, half dozen games we made up. So I was one of the main kids in that. We tackle football without pads on the grass, you know. But that's my life after school. My life in school, the kids were a little bit older than I was. I had skipped a grade, like first grade. So that kind of caught up with me in high school. And that was a different batch of kids, you know, that wasn't kids that I was familiar with. So I was kind of on the fringes of the high school society. So that was how I got on the police radar. And the second thing is I was a sensitive teenager. This was my first brush with death, and I had an emotional reaction, you know, to a classmate. I mean, I barely knew her. She was in two of my classes, a freshman, one as a sophomore. I knew her name. She knew mine. That was pretty much the extent of it. We weren't even really on a high-buy basis. But nonetheless, I had the emotional reaction. And the police thought, well, being as though you barely know the girl, you know, your reaction really doesn't make sense. So, you know, they interpreted that as some sort of sign that I was sorry for what I did. So that's how I got on their radar. So for about 6 weeks, the police played this cat and mouse game with me, in which half the time they would talk to me like I was a suspect, and the other half the time they push too hard and I'd get afraid and I'd want to get away from them. You know, Jeff as this junior detective helper theme was developed by them. Oh, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you see anything. You know, stop in from time to time. Prior to being a teenager, I dreamed about being a cop when I grew up. So this unexpected early opportunity to do this quasi-police work, along with my age being 16, was how they were able to pull the wool over my eyes as to the absurdity that a 16-year-old would be able to assist in an active homicide investigation. I came from a single-parent household. My father was never involved in my life in any capacity. And that intersected with the good cop, bad cop technique in which one officer was pretending to be a friend. In time, I began to look up to him as a father figure. So eventually they got me to agree to take a lie detector test. You know, they said they had some new information that come in to the file. They wanted to share it with me. That would allow me to be even more helpful to them. First, though, I'd have to take and pass the polygraph. So rather than go to school, I went to the police station for the test. My mother and grandmother thought I was in school. No idea that anything was wrong. Therefore, they did not call around looking for me. They drove me 40 minutes away by car from Peekskill in Westchester County to the town of Brewster in Putnam County. That means I don't know where I'm at. I have no money. I have no independent way of escape. There were 3 cops that came there with me from Peekskill, but then there was also the polygraphist, who was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, Daniel Stevens. He was dressed like a civilian, never identified himself as law enforcement, never read me my rights. I had no attorney present. They gave me nothing to eat the whole time I was there. They gave me a 4-page brochure which explained how the polygraph worked, but it had a lot of big words in it that I didn't understand. But I figured, well, I'm there to help the police. What does it matter? Let's just get on with it. From there, they put me in a small room. He gave me countless cups of coffee to get me nervous. I mean, as you might imagine, at 16-year-old, I wasn't a coffee drinker, much less like a chain coffee drinker. And then he literally wired me up to the machine, and then he launched into his interrogation. So he invaded my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. You know, towards the end, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." And when he said that to me, that really shot my fear through the roof. And at that point, the cop that had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and he told me, "Look, they're going to harm you. I've been holding them off. I can't do it any longer. You have to help yourself. Look, just tell them what they want to hear. You can go home afterwards. You're not going to be arrested." So being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, I wasn't thinking about the long term. I was just concerned with my safety in the moment. I was in fear of my life. The fact that I didn't know where I was, no one else knew where I was, loomed large in my mind. Then there was this possibility of harm. There's this false life preserver. So I took the out which he offered, and I made up a story based on the information they gave me that day and in the 6 weeks run up to it. None of this was audio or video recorded. By the time everything was all said and done, I had collapsed on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. Obviously, I was arrested. I was charged with a murder and rape.
So, you have about 3 serious questions came up my mind as I was listening to you. Like, at 16, don't you have to have your parent with you? That's
No.
number one.
You
No,
do not.
okay.
No.
So I'm mistaken about that.
Right.
What was the other one that came to mind? Did you take this to trial?
I did. I'm going to get
You
into
did.
that in just a second, but I wanted to avoid a nonstop long monologue to let you guys get a
Right.
few questions in, and then I'm going to take you through each stage of this.
Okay, so you did take it to trial.
I did. Yes.
Okay. And all right. How about you? Morgan, you have anything?
I'm just blown away at how the procedure goes and what they do, and I'm sure that's still going on to today, and how they do things to young children that were like him, like you, Jeffrey, young single parent home. You think you're doing something by helping out, and I'm just blown away by this. I'm just really blown away by how this was done and how you just fell into the system this way. And now that you're helping people and things like that, like wow, I'm just really blown away by that. And to see that you're still alive is just a blessing. To see you still here, wow, I'm just
Now,
blown
before
away
I
by
went
that.
to trial, the results of a DNA test came in from the FBI lab, which showed that semen found in and around the victim didn't match. But instead of acknowledging they made a mistake, they continued to prosecute full speed ahead. To explain away the DNA, the prosecutor got the medical examiner to lie, to commit perjury. When there's an autopsy done, there's written and audio notes which are taken as findings are made. So it's only 6 months after the autopsy, only after the DNA doesn't match me, that this medical examiner suddenly says, now try to follow this. This is a little tricky. He says that I remember that I forgot to document medical findings, which he claimed showed that the 15-year-old victim, a immigrant from Colombia who'd been in the country for about a year and a half, really sheltered life as I understood it, never went anywhere unless she was with her older sister or her parents. He claims that he found medical evidence to show that she was promiscuous. And that allowed the prosecutor to say, aha, that's how the DNA doesn't match Deskovic, and yet he was guilty. She was sleeping around. So she slept with somebody consensually, then you came along, murdered and raped her. Then taking it a step further, he mentioned another youth by name that he claimed had slept with the victim. But he didn't have a DNA test performed to prove that. He didn't call him even as a witness. He just threw the suggestion in the air. And he got away with that because of 2 factors. Firstly, the victim's parents were not coming to court, so they had no idea of how her reputation was being trashed, what they were saying about her, and the furtherance of trying to convict me. The whole thing was a lie. She wasn't promiscuous at all. But more importantly, my attorney, my public defender, allowed him to get away with it. So he essentially didn't defend me. He never interviewed or called as a witness my alibi. I was actually playing wiffle ball when the crime happened. He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me. He never used that to argue that proved that the confession was coerced and false. He rarely met with me. He was always shutting me up when I tried to explain to him that I was innocent and what happened in the interrogation room. He should have never represented me because of a conflict of interest. So this other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of that same public defender agency, and specifically by the lawyer who was supposed to be supervising him on my case. So that conflict prevented the defense from asking him to give a sample. It prevented the defense from calling him as a witness. Lastly, when it was time to cross-examine this medical examiner, he stood up in open court and with a big smile on his face, like they were friends from back in the day, my lawyer said to him, "You're going to be pleased to know that I don't have a single question for you." Now, there were a couple of irregularities in my trial. So first of all, the polygraph test results, the polygraph not being scientific, being unreliable, and being inflammatory, prejudicial. The results are not allowed in the court unless both sides agree. We didn't agree, but the judge allowed the polygraphist to repeatedly tell the jury I failed the polygraph when I denied committing the crime. He let him say that several times while banning my lawyer from cross-examining him on the methods he used, because he said, well, this alleged confession happened while you were being polygraphed, so we're going to let him testify. So there was that. And another thing was the victim's bra, along with her clothes, had been entered into evidence by the prosecution. The jury asked to see the bra, which was important because one of the statements they coerced out of me, I said that I ripped her bra off. Well, there's some bras you can't rip the way that they're made. So when the jury asked to see the bra, that's when the judge said, well, the clothes, including the bra, were left in the court over the weekend. And apparently the janitors thought it was garbage. So it's been thrown out and it's not available anymore. We're going to substitute the clothes with a photograph, which the judge said, quote unquote, you can almost see the bra in the photo. And lastly, on the third day of jury deliberation, I'm going to end and you guys get in with your questions. On the third day of jury deliberation, the jury sent a note out asking if they couldn't come up with the unanimous verdict, would they be kept sequestered over the Christmas holiday. I learned many years later, at that point, it was 11-1 to find me guilty, but there was a holdout juror who thought I was innocent, and they were all pressing that juror. And when they got the answer from the judge, that really ratcheted the pressure up on that juror, and they didn't want to be there over the Christmas holiday. Neither did that juror. So he switched his vote based on that. And I was then found guilty of a murder and rape I didn't commit. And I was given a 15 to life sentence where I was sent to Elmira Correctional Facility with the judge sentencing me despite saying to me, maybe you are innocent. And of course, that's where I met you at, Kamal, for the first time. So any questions on that part of the story?
Mahogany, I'm going to let you go first.
Did you ever wonder why me? Like, why is this happening to me at such a young age? What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, I didn't think why me, because that was a little bit more sophisticated than what I was at 17. But a similar thought, not quite that, but along those lines somewhat, was, I mean, half the time I couldn't. Let me back up a step. When they said guilty, the first couple of charges they read off, I was found not guilty of. And when they said guilty, I'm like, wait, did I just hear that? Did I miss the word not? Is my hearing correct? And then they said guilty and guilty. I mean, then my head started spinning because up until that point in time, I thought that only people who committed crimes were found guilty. So I couldn't believe that. I was kind of beside myself. And the other thing is when I got to I remember being in Elmira Correctional Facility when I first arrived there. I remember half the time I didn't believe what my senses were telling me. I could not believe that I was in prison, in an adult prison at that, with a 15 to life sentence for a murder and rape I didn't commit.
Do you think children at that age should be with that population, no matter the crime? Should you?
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. No, I don't think anyone below 23 should be mixed in with adults.
With that population?
No, because you're vulnerable. You're physically. I mean, look, what was I going to do against a fully formed man, right? If they decided to attack me, you think I'm going to be able to beat a grown man? And then I'm there for a sex offense, which is a vigilante mentality towards people convicted of sex offenses, you know? So that was a very dangerous. And then kids could be manipulated,
Yes.
sucked into gangs, which I saw countless men and boys of color sucked into gangs because of that very dynamic. Kamal did too.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes.
So the are you done? Mark? I'm sorry, there was a pause in there.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
Um. So with the why, that was a good question. What I was thinking kind of links up with the why me. Did you ever think that? I was wondering, what did they see in you that would think that you would rape and murder someone at 16 years old? Even if you were a little introverted, right? Um, I think that's what you said. It was different. He wasn't hanging out. He wasn't socializing with a lot of people at certain times in school, but outside of school, he was. But in any event, what did they see in you at 16, man? That's the first question that comes to mind, man. Like, I don't get it, man. And I've known you for a long time, and I see you now, and I could only imagine you at 16. I don't see them seeing you, but all they saw was an opportunity to get a conviction for this horrible crime that happened in Westchester County, right? That was their number one priority, especially um,
Hmm.
Miss Pereira, Janine Pereira, right?
Well,
That's
so
another
Piro,
story that we have to
Piro,
talk
so
about
Piro
too.
wasn't the DA when I was convicted. Vagari was, but she became the DA before my first
Okay.
appeal was decided. So
Hmm.
she fought 7 of my appeals, which I'm going to get into in a second. But let me make one other quick comment on the prison side of things, as it feels like it's the right time. I wanted to share a dramatic moment. So when I first got to Elmira, the guards asked me, do you want to sign into protective custody? And I was like, well, what's that? And well, that's if you feel as though your life is in danger because of the charges, you might want to agree to go in protective custody, because that's the only way we could protect you. And I said, well, what would that actually involve? And they said, well, you couldn't go to school. You could go to no programs. You'll be kept in your cell like 23 hours a day. You'll be let out 1 hour a day by yourself, and you watch TV, take a shower or a phone. You'd be by yourself. And so listen to this line of reasoning that I quickly figured out on the fly. I'm 17 years old there, right? And I remember thinking to myself, this was my thought process. You know, um, I already can't believe I'm here, that I'm in prison for something I didn't do. I'm not, that's all terrible enough. I have no idea how I'm going to do this time or any of that. But I'm not going to make some decision that's going to result in my time being even worse. So, you know what? I'm not going in any protective custody. I'm going to general population, and I'm going to take my chances. And if somebody kills me, well, I guess I don't have to worry about doing the rest of that life sentence anymore now, do I?
That's
Mm.
interesting.
Wow.
It's interesting that I had no idea, because you never came across with any of this. Not even the energy was like that.
Right.
Maybe it got better at times, um, but and I didn't see any of it. Only that was, and I'm actually surprised at Johnson. I'm kind of surprised at him. I didn't think he was living like that. Him and Boss was the other one, right?
Boss man. Yeah, boss man. Yeah. No, and in
Boss man
general,
was
Johnson
messing
was,
around.
what's that?
Boss man was messing with you too.
No, it was only Johnson. And
This is
it
some,
was,
and he mahogany. I'm talking about these dudes like used to be they bodybuilders. These some big men for real, officers,
I can only
big men.
imagine,
No, I'm talking about the
especially at
officers. They were big,
not
like
me,
right.
they.
not me,
Oh
not me.
yeah.
He's talking about the officers, just to
I'm talking
be
about the
clear.
Oh yeah.
officers. They were,
I know. Yeah.
yeah.
When you say Johnson, I know they call each other, COs by name like that. I can only imagine it's a 17-year-old, 16-year-old. That's frightening. And then, like you said, you
Mm.
got these master manipulators behind bars and things like that with you. And I firmly believe that no young person needs to be in that population either. That is
Now, I
just
just saying, I
too
was in a
much.
facility where they were actually putting hands on guys that had sex offenses, and you couldn't go to the best yard. Like when you first got there, they would be like, "Wait a minute, let me see your ID card." You got one of them crimes. Don't lie to me, 'cause I'm gonna find out. If you say yes, say, listen, don't come back to this yard no more. That's how they was giving up. But they were putting hands on people in Fishkill. That was Fishkill. It was a good
Wow.
jail, but that was the only thing. Like they didn't have the. You had it out with an officer. They knew
It's
how to
over.
catch you. They catch you coming back from wreck and make you do this Superman thing. They keep saying, spread your legs, come back until you can't come back no more. And then you get an attitude. Once you turn your head, they pounce on you. And I seen them do this
Right.
over and over and over and over again.
Did
But
you
anyway, just to
did you
support
ever
what you're saying, I didn't know if you ever
right.
experienced that with the police. And Gowanda was supposed to be the most notorious. That and
You heard about
Oneida, which
Rwanda.
got shut down for that. Um,
Were you ever in the box at any time?
Yeah, I was. I went to the special housing unit one time for 28 days. So basically, I was the, people in Shawangunk Correctional Facility, the prisoners discovered what I was incarcerated for. It was a facility close to the city. People were on, it was a small facility. Everyone was into everyone's business. Nobody had anything to do. So they went to the law library and made copies. When you take an appeal, the decision comes out in the law books. So they made copies of that, and they were passing it around to people and stapling it up on the board where announcements, are made. And so the whole facility got hostile against me, really, except for a handful of people. And then, there were 4 people in particular that really distinguished themselves. And long story short, these couple of guys were coming to stab me. As far as they were concerned, they thought I was a sex offender. So look, I didn't wait for them to attack me. I mean, I defended myself preemptively, and I ended up almost losing my life, and I got sent to the special housing unit for like 28 days. I want to quickly mention what that's like to be in a special housing unit, and then we'll discuss
Right.
on appeals. So
mhm.
basically, the light's on 24 hours a day. You can't see the sky. There's no clock. The only way I had any idea of what time of the day it was would be if there were breakfast items on the food tray. You can't see anybody. If there were times where if I was sleeping and the guards came around with the food, a couple of times I woke up and they were feeding the prisoner in the cell next to me, and I said, "Yeah, can I eat? You didn't feed me. Oh, be awake next time." So I missed food. Yeah, you can't go to the commissaries. You can't, there is no food in your cell. They take almost all your property. You can't go to the commissary and buy food items. So if you miss that food that the COs bring around to you, that's it, until the next meal. They're supposed to send a mental health professional around to see how you're doing mentally, but there's no they're talking to you outside of your cell bars, so everybody on that gallery can hear everything that's said. So there's no confidentiality. I'm not going to, discuss any kind of difficulties I'm going through for what? So everybody can hear it and make fun and be in my business. So, you can't, they send legal stuff to you. I mean, anytime they take you out of the cell, they put you in handcuffs. They don't even allow you to have your toiletry items. That's all put in a box with your name on it that only gets opened when you come out yourself for the shower. The recreation there is a small caged area by yourself. You can't even see the sky. After going 3 or 4 times, I mean, it was such an inconvenience to be put in handcuffs that I started refusing to go to recreation. You want to go to rec? No, it's not worth it to go to rec. You try to sleep the time away, but then after 3 or 4 days, after you sleep in 14, 15, 16, you get slept out. So you can't keep sleeping. They give you books, but that's done in 3 days. So you're just laying on the bed looking up at the friggin' ceiling for the next 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
That's a tough way to go. I got to tell you.
Yes.
And you
Isn't
remember
there like
all the
prison time?
details.
Yeah, it's crisp and vivid because it was a traumatic experience. And while I was there,
Yes.
and then I'm gonna go to my appeals here. While I was there in the middle of 28 days for defending myself against people that were coming to stab me because they thought I was a sex offender. While I'm there, I get the news that I've lost in federal court because my attorney was given the wrong information by the court clerk pertaining to the filing procedure. So they dismissed my case because the legal paperwork arrived 4 days late. So that was my lowest point, which is a good jump off point to the appeal. So I went to the appellate division, the first court. My lawyer, I had a different lawyer now. She was great. She argued that I was actually innocent. You know, that the verdict was against the weight of the evidence. There was legally insufficient evidence that the prosecution hadn't proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. All those were based on the DNA not matching me. My Fifth Amendment rights were being violated was an issue. Polygraphist being allowed to tell the jury I failed the polygraph while banning him from being questioned on his methods. You know, confrontation clause issue. That was raised. The evidence being thrown out was raised. The judge being biased was raised. Altogether, 10 issues were raised. The appellate division said, look, you weren't in custody, so your statements were voluntary. They ruled that the verdict, that there was overwhelming evidence of guilt. And then they knocked out all the rest of my issues in one sentence. They said, we've looked at appellant's remaining contentions and find them to either be not preserved for appellate, either not meritorious or not preserved for review. They ruled against me 5-0, and it was all downhill from there. The re-argument motion was denied in one word, denied. Court of Appeals declined to give me permission to appeal to them. I lost in federal court because the paperwork arrived late. That decision was upheld by the Federal Court of Appeals twice, which included Judge Sonia Sotomayor signed off that decision was okay. She did it twice, the empathetic Latina she'd like us to believe. And then the U.S. Supreme Court declined to give me permission to appeal. So all my appeals are over. That's 7 appeals. That's 11 years. The only way back in the court when that happens is if you could find some new evidence. So I had no money to hire a lawyer or an attorney, hence a letter writing campaign, which I wrote letters uncountable for like 4 years, never getting answers other than the occasional no. And then I went to the parole board where, because I maintained my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility, I got turned down for parole. And then I did one more year after that. They ordered me to do 2. But one of the letters that I wrote to a book author in care of the publishing company instead was sent by the publishing company to an investigator. She believed in my innocence based on the DNA. She suggested I write the Innocence Project. She lobbied them from outside the organization. She got other respected legal entities to lobby them. And then I got lucky that one of the intake workers, a non-lawyer by the name of Maggie Taylor, when the Innocence Project didn't want to agree to represent me because the DNA had already excluded me, she represented it a second time. And when they again declined to go forward, she presented it a third time, getting them to accept it. So that was the first of 3 keys. That was one key. Second key, Pirro left office and her successor allowed me to get the testing. As I understand it, neither one of them liked each other. And she was in the middle of running for attorney general. So I think that her successor was hoping that I'd be exonerated to damage her run for AG. But look, either way, I'll take it. And number 3, we got lucky that the actual perpetrator's DNA was in the data bank. It was there because he killed a second victim 3.5 years later, who was a school teacher and had 2 children. So that was how I was exonerated. Questions, comments?
Wow.
I'll let you.
That,
Well, I was just going to say that this story is just too interesting, man. It's just too much. But I don't know. I'm kind of stuck right now. I have something I want to share. I'm just so emotional. I can't believe that, and it's so vivid. This is when I mention that, it's because it tells me the impact that it had on you. Because this is 18 years after the fact of you being home, and it's still as if that impact is still there. That's what I'm.
It is
that's
though.
what
It
I'm
is
feeling.
still there. The impact is still there, though. It is still there. That was a traumatic thing that lasted for 16 years. And every time I lost an appeal, and even when I got turned down for parole, that was like I was wrongfully convicted all over again. And then you got to think, you know, that didn't happen from age 30 to 45 or 45 to 60. That
Right,
was from
right,
like
right,
17 to
right.
32. So
Mhm.
that's all trauma times three.
Yeah, right, true. So with
How did
Janine Pereira, I just one
Piro,
more thing, and I'll let you go right after this one. With Janine Pereira, I
Piro.
Piro, what I understand with her too is the day that that came out in the newspaper,
Mhm.
she was supposed to be giving a speech towards her campaign towards Attorney General, and that killed her campaign. She got killed after that article came out about you, from what I understand. Is
Yeah,
that
that's true.
true?
Yeah, yes, that's true. She got a lot of negative publicity. You know, she tried. Her answer was, "Well, I wasn't the DA when he was convicted." True enough, you weren't.
Right,
So you mean
right,
to tell me that you fighting 7 appeals, that you blocking me from getting further testing, that you getting the court to throw my case out because the paperwork arrived 4 days too late? You mean to tell me that you have no moral guilt at all whatsoever? You didn't have a hand in keeping the
right,
ball rolling against me?
right, exactly. When it wasn't her conviction. All right.
Right. It wasn't it. Yeah. Yeah,
Even her
exactly.
conviction.
Yeah, it wasn't even her office. I mean, it wasn't even a conviction obtained under her administration.
That's
So
what I'm saying. Yeah.
I agree.
Well, Mahogany she's been very patient. Thank you.
how did it affect you when you would hear the verdict after keep trying so many tries, so many attempts and things of that nature? How did it affect you when you went back to prison? Did you take it out on anybody? Did you just sit there quietly? Or did you just keep reading? Like, how did it affect you?
All right. So I never actually left the prison, and they don't bring you to court for the appeals, by the way.
Oh,
So we
okay.
share that. But when I would get the news back, you know, through legal mail from the court and also from my attorney, I mean, so in my mind, I wasn't doing a 15 to life sentence. I thought I was just doing a year or two to the next appeal, which I was sure I was going to win because knew I was innocent and I still believed in the court system. So, and it's kind of hard to do time on a crime that you're innocent of and to not have hope. But when you have the hope, that builds up, you know. And when I would get the news to the contrary, that was a very difficult emotional thing. I mean, I remember I almost passed out when I got the decision, the first thing, and I'm walking back to my cell and I'm opening up the paper and it's a long thing and I can't really read it. So I just jump down to the bottom where it's going to have what the bottom line decision is. And I saw the word denied and I passed out. I sat down. I couldn't walk anymore. I just like sat
Mm,
down on the gallery and just kind of like blanked out for a couple of minutes.
wow.
Yeah, it was
Were you
every
pro se? Did you file these?
no, no, it
You
was
had
not
a
pro se.
lawyer,
No, no, I had an 18B lawyer
18B, for all the appeals.
for all the yeah, for the state appeals, and then in the third, I had a private lawyer for the habeas corpus petition. Some people came into my mother's orbit that weren't there before, and they all contributed like a manageable amount of money. So I had a private lawyer for one proceeding.
Okay, okay.
And then after that, there was another lawyer that I got in touch with. I don't know if you remember Frank Kindlin or not, the lawyer who was,
Mm,
all right, there was another prisoner there who had been a lawyer on the street. And he, he had an idea. He connected me with a lawyer that won a DNA exoneration for somebody else in a Buffalo case. Okay. And he connected me with her. And so she got the court to assign her to my case. There's somebody in the background that please got to stop, you
yeah,
know.
I don't know.
But
You got too much.
she got herself assigned, and she represented me for the next three appeals. So, and then ultimately, I had the Innocence Project, you know, representing me for the 440 motion at the end.
Mm. So pro se, real quick, is when you go into the courts by yourself, without a lawyer representing you. You know, if you have a little, if you have a little knowledge of the law and you study how to submit motions or whatever. You have some people that represent yourself. And I was just wondering, that's why I asked, and I'm just letting everyone know. And it does make a difference, usually, opposed to having your own lawyer because they don't like to see pro se litigants win. You know, it undermines the profession of being a lawyer. Pro se to begin with, pro se litigants could really win, and a lot of those, the work be good though. Even in your case, I'm sure you look at these motions and the arguments, the briefs, the memorandums of law, and it's on point. The research was done, everything is on point. All the points is covered. But then this judge could just come back with his black robe and say, in his opinion, the
Mm,
way he interpreted, those are the two killers right there. In his opinion
mm,
or her opinion, the way he interprets it, and he can say anything
mhm,
after that. You know,
Right. I
and
used
that
to go to the
makes
law
sense.
library. I used to go to the law library all the time. I got kind of skilled at the law. I mean, I wasn't pro se, but I was suggesting different arguments and sending
Mm.
different cases and decisions and suggestions to the lawyer because I didn't trust the lawyer to represent me anymore like I did at trial. I wanted to
mhm.
be more proactive about
Right,
things.
right, right.
Wow.
So it's about that time. Maybe we're gonna discuss these laws that you actually passed, right? In
Yes,
California,
I
New
helped
York,
pass.
and
Yes,
Pennsylvania. Not just New York. You got two other states in there. Wow,
right.
and
So
one's
real
on the
quick.
other side of the country.
Yes. So I'll start with laws I'm trying to that I did pass, and then we'll talk about laws that I'm trying to. And obviously,
Mhm.
when I say me, I'm referring to my foundation and also working in collaboration with many other organizations and advocates. But so I can't take the sole credit, but I definitely was a central figure to be sure. So one of them was in 2017, we passed a law that mandated that the police videotape interrogations, keeping in mind false confessions of cause, wrongful conviction.
Right,
29% of the
right.
cases, my interrogation was not videotaped. So we passed that law in 2017. Unfortunately, the legislature passed the law making exceptions for homicide, sex offenses, and drug cases. So that's one of the laws I'm trying to pass now to get rid of those exceptions. But the interrogation law, right? Second thing was identification reform. So, we helped pass a law that the best practices, as proven by social scientists for doing photo arrays and lineups, that was passed. Still lacks a couple of the best key practices, but does improve the procedure overall. And DNA data bank. So I was cleared because of the DNA data bank. So I was in favor of expanding the data bank to include even convictions on misdemeanors, on the theory that the bigger the data bank is, the more of a chance the actual perpetrator would be identified through a DNA test, which would lead to the exoneration of other innocent people, much like I was. So there's those three. The Commission on Prosecutor Conduct, so an independent oversight board, first in the country.
Mhm.
We helped to pass that could investigate allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. That was passed. And then discovery reform, which pertains to sharing information by both sides. So previously, the law was that the prosecution would only have to turn over number one material it thought was helpful to the defense. That's called Brady material. But the problem with that is you have the prosecutor determining what's most helpful to the defense. And sometimes they would not turn things over. And secondly, what was called Rosario material, the state was only obligated to turn over witness statements and prior testimony of witnesses that they were planning to call at a trial or a hearing. Not statements of everybody, just statements of people that they were planning to call, and they would not have to. They would often not turn that over until the eve of a hearing, the eve of a trial. So that's not enough time to digest something, conduct investigation, change your theory of the case. So it was basically sandbagging. So we changed that to now everything has to be turned over automatically within 30 days, everything, and anything beyond that, the district attorney's office would have to get a court order for any type of extension. So it's all the evidence automatically within 30 days. So those are the laws in New York. There was another law in Pennsylvania, an expungement law. So what that law basically states in Pennsylvania, so if you were found not guilty or a crime was dismissed or you were exonerated, you could get that automatically off of your record. Okay, so we helped pass that. Any questions on what was passed?
Mm.
No. Okay. In
I
terms of
do. I do. I just wanted to see if she wanted to go, but I do have one quick one. Did you do it through fighting cases, fighting someone's case, and then getting
no,
the precedent that way, or you
no,
just went straight in and submitted a motion to have them,
no,
or you did
no.
it through
That's
the
not
legislator? The
legislature. I
legislature.
did it
Okay.
through meeting with elected officials, building support, press conferences, media, getting other being the liaison to the exoneree
Okay.
community, bringing other exonerees. My
Mhm.
policy person, Bill Bastick, from It Could Happen to You. Doing the day-to-day of it, following up with emails and engaging in
Okay.
other tactics, stuff like sign-on letters, petition signatures, memos of support. One time we did postcards. We flooded legislators with postcards from people that were living in their district. We did all that. It's a lot. It was a lot.
This is a law that's needed, and I'm going to shut up after this, and you're going to know when you hear it. The appellate division needs to have more hands-on when it comes to parole decisions. It's ridiculous that will send a decision back 6 and 7 times in a row, the same person, allowing the court to keep making the same mistakes or making mistakes. Once or twice you send it back to be corrected. Then after that, you step in and say, you know what, release the person, man. 3 times, come on, what you playing? But they let it go on. Some people do 14 and 15 years in television, just sit there and like, we can't do nothing. And I think the legislature should do something about that, because what are you appeals court for if you can't release or force the lower court to, do the right thing after once or twice? I don't know.
All right, I'll
That's
comment on that in a minute. But Mahogany, you have a comment or a
yes.
question?
Mhm.
When someone does like 25 years of prison, do you feel that they should still have parole, or
Well, yeah,
should they just be released?
Good
well,
question.
well, wait. I think if someone's minimum sentence, whatever it is, whether it's 25 years or something else, okay,
Mhm.
I think that when their minimum time is up and they go to the parole board, the parole board should determine if they've been rehabilitated, if they were released, or they likely to live at liberty without breaking the law. That's what it's supposed to be. And what's
Mhm.
happened is, instead of that, they're just denying people if they were convicted of a violent crime, which is something that somebody can't control. I mean, the judge already took that into consideration when fashioning a sentence already. So it's not up to the parole board to, in effect, resentence somebody. To deny people parole based only on what the crime is almost a complete abandonment of any idea of a belief in rehabilitation, redemption, and a second chance. So in terms of laws I'm trying to pass, this kind of segues from that. So while my main shtick is innocence, I do have a strong secondary interest in non-innocence reforms, things I was subjected to, things I saw happen to other people. So parole reform definitely being one of them. So I advocate for fair and timely parole, which would mean that the parole board would have to cite one additional factor other than nature of the crime to explain why they denied somebody. And then elder parole, which is a companion bill. So it's a proposition which says that if you're 55 and you've done 15 years, you should be given a parole board hearing, not a guaranteed release, just a hearing to be considered. For that, recognizing that people age out of crime.
Mhm.
People who are younger, they're more prone to peer pressure, not thinking about long-term consequences. And again, some people age out of crime. I knew a lot of people there that were much different people than what they were when they committed crimes 10, 15, 20 years before that. They weren't the same person. And then also, I think about, I knew the prison is simply unable. The medical care is terrible in prison, first of all. Okay, that's in general. But beyond that, particularly inept at dealing with advanced geriatric needs. And I saw people
Mhm.
there that were literally pushed around in wheelchairs and doubled over and walking in a cane, or dialysis. There's even hospice in some prison. People are dying while and all that's so disturbing to me, just on an emotional level, on a humanitarian level. All of that supporting the idea of elder parole. And yes, I do believe that the court should have the ability to order a release, because too many times the parole board, they do not follow its own rules. So that's some of the non-innocent stuff. But in terms of innocence, getting rid of those exceptions, then tying back to your earlier point, Mahogany, much earlier in the interview, Youth Interrogation Act. So that would give 16, 17-year-olds and kids younger than that a non-waivable right to counsel, that they have to speak to a lawyer to explain their rights before they can decide to waive them, recognizing that kids don't understand their rights. And what we call a police deception bill, which is it would ban the cops from lying to suspects, recognizing that that's coercive. That leads to false confessions. So that's what I'm doing in New York. Really quickly, Pennsylvania, one of 12 states that does not compensate the wrongfully convicted. So if I had been exonerated there, I wouldn't have been entitled to a dime. So working on that. And then lastly, in California, that same oversight commission we passed in New York, building support for that in California. So in general, when both New York and California pass the same law, other states generally follow. So that's the theory on that. We want to usher in a new era of accountability, especially on the prosecutorial level. So let me be quiet. Comments and questions.
I didn't understand, what does it mean when you say hands-on? Come on, when you say hands-on about parole, what does that mean?
It means that the courts do not currently have the ability to release somebody that's been denied parole. If you win an appeal of a parole denial, your remedy is that they give you another parole board hearing. They are not able to order you release. And it's happened that people who have gotten the decisions reversed, they go back to the parole board, and then they get denied on the same grounds. The same thing happens repeatedly. And another glitch quickly is that, and this is a real deficiency in the system, if you get denied parole and you appeal, if you come up for parole before you get a decision and you go to that parole board hearing, your appeal is dismissed. They say that it's moot, that it's just academic, because if you had won your litigation, the only thing you were going to get was a new parole board hearing anyway, and you just got that. Why do we have to waste the time and money on this?
Well, so you're done, Molly? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering, because I hear a lot that Pennsylvania's Commonwealth, does that play a role in you trying to pass that bill, what you were trying to pass?
I don't think that, whether it's statehood or a Commonwealth really is a factor. Advocates have been trying to pass that for a long time. Pennsylvania was then basically abandoned, left for dead. People, they just threw their hands up. We're never going to pass this here. Yeah, but my organization, the foundation, the coalition group, It Could Happen to You, which we're part of. I'm an advisory board member of, and we have chapters in New York, Pennsylvania, California. We've been at it over there for about 4 or 5 years. We have a bill introduced. We're building support for it, and we're going to keep doing this work until we can pass it. But we've brought it back to life, and we work in coalition, which gives us the advantage that no matter whose office we walk into, we have somebody, a representative of one group or another that's in our coalition that lives in the district of that elected official. And plus everybody in the coalition in Pennsylvania or California, they live in that state. It's just myself, the founder of the coalition, and one other person. We're in common to all three groups. Everyone else are stakeholders that live in that state. And that's what allows us to prevent them from saying, why don't you're just a bunch of New Yorkers, okay? No one here cares about this. Just go back to New York and do whatever you're going to do there. No, we have constituents of yours in your state that we're representing, that we work in coalition with, that are in favor of this.
So I want to go back to your question, Mahogany, but I don't I don't know if you meant it differently, and if you didn't, it's a thought in my mind about parole. Did you mean there should be no parole when the person comes home, or do you talk about the parole board?
I'm talking
I
about. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
Go
I'm
ahead.
but she asked a question, Jeffrey, and I think you might have misinterpreted the question.
All right. So I don't. I think that I want the parole board hearing process to be improved. I do not. I am not in favor of no supervision when somebody is released. I think there should be some supervision over some period
some
of
Okay.
time.
when
Okay.
you
Up until a certain point in time, yes, for sure.
Right.
does the
I and
parole
I
does
and I
parole
kind of differ with that because if you believe, see, the problem is they don't believe in their system, right? That's why they handle us when we come home like that. Because if you really think you were doing a good job in there and helping us transition mentally and emotionally and as a human being instead of treating us like animals, then you wouldn't be worried about what we did when we came home. We look at some of these European prisons, how their approach to rehabilitation is so much different. Like they hands on, they treat the person like a human being. They sit on the bed with them. We don't get that here. We don't that, so and they don't worry about it. These people come home and have something they're not worrying about them anymore because the way they handle them is different. That's just my opinion. I think parole is a guilt trip that they know they didn't do a good job, so they feel like they have to watch it. And in some cases, some people are just tough like that. But anyway, that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion, Jeffrey. So we have a question from you, from Oleyeme Agora. How do you determine who you help in your foundation? And then the same, I'm sure there's a lot of people who need your help who are also innocent. Is there any guideline or criteria that a person must follow to be represented by you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So
Mm.
we only accept cases from people that number one, we believe in their innocence, and our internal standard is it's at least colorable, it's at least a plausible claim of innocence based on
Mm.
something objective. And part of that is we know what the patterns are based on cases that have ended in a DNA exoneration. So we know what the patterns are, that an informant might be lying, that an identification might be mistaken, or that a confession might be false. So part of our analysis of do we believe in the innocence claim involves assessing the evidence that of guilt that was used by the state. So so do we believe in the innocence claim? And secondly, do we see a potential route to victory? So we might be convinced that someone's innocent, and that's why we take the case. But that's not how we're going to win. The court will not allow us to relitigate what's already in the record. So we have to find some new evidence that probably would have led to a different outcome, right? That's the newly discovered evidence legal standard. Would the new evidence probably have led to a different outcome? Or secondly, the actual innocence standard, which is clear and convincing evidence. So we keep these in mind when we're analyzing a case. We're figuring what are the investigative lines to play. We might, for a DNA case, it's kind of simple. I mean, hair, seminal fluid, blood, um, a clothing item that somebody might have sweated into. Now, in a non-DNA case, we would look for similar crimes in nearby areas, alternative suspects. We would file a Freedom of Information law request, which often documents are turned over that should have been turned over before but weren't. That might either be evidence of innocence or it could furnish a new investigative lead. We might re-interview a witness if we thought somebody was untruthful when they testified. Sometimes a new witness bubbles to the surface. Certainly, if there's a junk science that's been used, that would be an attack point. A junk science example might be footprints, tire tracks, bite marks, bullet lead analysis, where we're going to pretend that we know what the chemical composition is, that, these bullets that were made at this plant in Detroit and, selling at this sports shop, which you happen to buy, that's the whole fiction there. Arson, where it's not scientific at all because there's no data. We don't know how accurate something is. What is the error rate? So like arson, that's just verbal traditions passed down in conversation from one fire chief to another. Oh, this fire starts here or was used here. It makes these type of burn patterns, and that's all a junk science. So, but it's my favorite dog scent testimony. Where we're going to give the dog an item from a crime scene or a victim, and we're going to give the dog an item from the suspect. And if the dog barks, then that means that the dog recognized the smell, which would all be laughable, except for the fact that people have been convicted based on that, and there's still people in prison. So my point is, those are the junk sciences, and if that's in any case that we would attack there. Lastly, the presence of anybody whose misconduct has bubbled to the surface in some other case, like a rogue detective or a forensic scientist whose fraud has come to light. So that we have to see something like that in order. So those two questions, and maybe the other quick thing as I wrap up this answer is, we make an assessment. Look, if all these things broke right, would this be enough to overturn? What are the odds are that it's going to break right? How much money and time would it take to actually run all these things down? And based on that, we make a decision. And decisions are made by consensus. That's how I protect myself, because I'm too close to this otherwise.
So we're going to go a few minutes over. He said you go 20 at the most. Are you okay, Margie? You good? Are you good? You have the time?
I'm gonna have to exit out.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Then maybe I'll just have this last question for him, and he can maybe answer real quick. Because, just been 18 years since you've been inside, but there's been a lot of forward movement in that period of time. They've changed. Pataki changed the complexion, not Pataki, Como changed the complexion of the parole commissions. He stopped just going to police officers and DAs for parole commissions. He started going to more liberal people that have social work, has social work background and work with, people, not just incarcerating people. And that's one forward movement there. And then they kind of like pull back on these violations on people. Before it used to be one violation, a curfew or a dirty urine, they send you right back to prison. Well, now it's almost hard to get sent back to prison with dirty urine. They look at it as a treatment, as someone that needs treatment instead of punishment. And even inside, they don't even send you to the box for the first time no more. You have to have a couple. So there's some forward movement. I'm wondering, do you also see that in the legislature? Do you see a new type of thinking now?
I do see a new type of thinking. I mean, some of the other legislation that's been bandied about, not passed yet, but just the fact that bills have been introduced and there is some discussion. Things like, for example, there was a bill called the Protect In-Person Visitation, which was to codify into law that prisoners had a right to in-person visitation in light of concerns that during COVID, video visitation was instituted. Right. And they were concerned, well, the Department of Corrections might get the bright idea. Why don't we just keep going with these video visits and just in the name of security? So, I mean, that bill, another bill which would stop forced labor, and another bill that would, pay prisoners more than the 16, 22, 25. And if you stayed in the job for 3 years, 32 cents an hour, that would improve the wages. Because remember, there's a lot of items that are not provided to prisoners. They don't provide you with shampoo, deodorant, postage, paper, pens, etc. That stuff's not provided. They do give you state soap, but, nobody in their right mind wants to use that state soap in light of how much it dries your skin out. Nobody in their right mind would ever want to use the state toothpaste, putting that in your mouth, but that's terrible taste. So you have to buy those things. But my point is only that many prisoners don't have outside support. There is no family or friends in touch with them. There is nobody to send them money. So they're just living off the land. And if you're making the type of pennies I just laid out, the pay grades, how are you going to meet your needs that way? And then some people, to add insult to injury, they were hit with a surcharge from the court. So the prison is taking half of the money. I mean, half of the money. I mean, imagine you got $4, man. You worked 2 weeks and you got $4
Mm-hmm.
buy those items and to buy any kind of food items because the food in prison, terrible, sometimes burned, sometimes not fully cooked, sometimes the contents used 4 times that week. So that's all those were concerns into like a wage, a wage that more than what those things were. So I said that to say that I'm using those things as examples that yes, I do think that criminal justice reform is the new wave. I think that we have the wind at our back rather than pushing this big boulder up the hill. That having been said, there are still, there is still some resistance. So
Of
really, yeah,
course, yeah,
I
yeah.
think we got the wind at our backs, and I'm
Mhm.
hoping that we can, usher in, a more just, accurate system. That's what I'm about. Okay, I'm about accuracy. I'm about justice. Hence my life's work, and I make sense of everything that happened to me. I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in the world, and with that acceptance, I have some inner peace about myself.
That's
I have
So,
good.
purpose.
we, Mahogany has to go. I don't know. You want to wrap it up, or so she can leave. I don't want her not to be a part of
Sure.
this. She hung out for so long.
I'll hear the
Any
rest of it
last
from
minute
you.
thoughts from anybody, whatever? Because we could go on and on. I mean, there's so many things I'm not saying, because I don't want to try to make it about me. So I'm trying to be careful not to, because I can identify
Right.
with a lot of things, and I could use myself as an example. And I'm trying to pull back from doing that, which is going to pull. This is his interview, but um, I'm going to try to let you go because you have to go. I'm sure you do,
Yes.
and if you said you do. Mm-hmm.
I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, Jeffrey. It was wonderful hearing it. It was I also learned from it at the same time. And I do believe that there should be some reform in the prisons. I don't work directly in a prison, but there should be some reform as far as like, the toothpaste and all that other stuff and parole and things of that nature. But again, thank you for sharing your story. And I'm just grateful to see that you're still here and you made it through the tough times. All right.
All
All
right.
right. I'm sorry. No, if I'll take it easy. God bless.
Okay.
God bless.
All
Thank you, everybody.
right. All right then. I didn't even get a chance to say. I think he was. I didn't get a chance to say what I was going to say.